Casey faces Morty as Cassidy, even though she's not as powerful or more experienced with that spot, but she is determined to give everything with her all, as she is finding very difficult against Morty, and especially its ghost type, because Cassidy isn't too used to facing up against this particular ghost type being very trickery, and not to mention that Casey is trying to use her newer Pokemon that recently she realized that she has been using Bailey heavily, and even though she is her strongest Pokemon, but she wants to rely on her other Pokemon, like her Zumare is damaged to keep up a win, and not to mention that for it being a normative has greatly benefited her and making it difficult for Mori his go strategy. And the one that simply is pretty much a star-started a shining Pokemon that it really brought out its all is electric, as Cassidy managed to befriend it to the point where she is able to capture it. And electric with its thunder punches is able to do significant damage to the Ghost Fairy type, as Cassidy has noticed, including Ash to a certain extent, that this Pokemon may be small, but it definitely has potential once it becomes stronger enough, as Cassidy managed to earn her Ghost type badge here, as both of the trainers pretty much continues on, and the only nearest town is next to the coast, which is pretty close to the open waters of Johto. And after a bit of traveling, as nothing happened really between the travel, as of course they do continue to train their Pokemon, but not as heavily as because recently the Pokemon is beginning has been engaging in intensive battle ever since that Johto Lotto tournament that happened, as Ash keeps reminding himself, playing out the same memories, how did his older Pokemon simply is unable to get a win as they should have easily. So maybe it's not particularly his older Pokemon. Maybe it's him and does it and just stretch that off. There's no way it could not be me because I did everything I had to do. It's clearly something is wrong with the older Pokemon that just probably got rusty or something, he's not entirely sure. But after returning to the city, as Cassidy and Ash decided to split ahead, as they know there's a gym leader around, and the fastest way to find around is to split off, leaving Cassidy herself for a moment, while on the other hand, as Ash is particularly struggling to find some sort location where you can find the gym. But apparently there's a Pokemon that is making a whole ruckus in the coastal shores, as a water type known as a Poliwhirl is beginning to make a huge ruckus and pretty much stopping anyone trying to get in near the boat. And simply as most of the people are mostly afraid to approach this water Pokemon. And Ash decided since it did attack him and pretty much the people, maybe Ash should sort out this water Pokemon, as he sends out Swinub to battle, and after a bit of struggle, and especially being a ground type and facing up against a water type, but luckily over time Swinub managed to pretty much barely knock out Poliwhirl, as Ash begins to notice how strong Poliwhirl is. And even though Ash thought he knocked out Poliwhirl, as Poliwhirl begins to stand up and going for a second battle, as Ash not wanting to injure his Swinub, as Ash has no choice but to throw his Pokeball and similarly captures the Poliwhirl. And after deal with that later on, as he's trying to find Cassidy as he's beginning to get much more doctor. And after a bit of asking around, as the people has pointed out that they seen Cassidy walking to that light tower, and Ash isn't too sure why he's been up. After for a while, as Ash finally found Cassidy, as she has been in the light tower, as Cassidy seems to be watching over a Pokemon for its trainer, and has been taking care of it. And thankfully, with her Pokemon Electric, simply trying to wanting to have a battle, as Emperor Rose isn't too privy on it, being very sick, as Ash simply is curious about why is Cassidy here and not with the gym challenge. As Cassidy reveals that the gym seems to be closed for a moment because the gym seems to be in care of something, including this Pokemon. And Ashley said, so this is a Pokemon, and Cassie simply nodded. As after a few moments, as Ash helping Cassidy as a gym leader known as Jasmine appeared, and as Cassidy introduces Ash to Jasmine and explaining the adventures they had recently, as Jasmine is quite worried about a Pokemon and a lot of things, and Ash simply asks why is her gym closed on the moment. As Jasmine, to this point, has a lot of things in her plate. A Pokemon being sick and wanting to meet up with an old friend, also and perhaps enter a tournament. As the tournament getting Ash and Cassie quite interested, they try to get information from Jasmine about this event, as Jasmine doesn't have any issues explaining everything about it, where once a year Johto hosts a water tournament where you can only use water Pokemon, and it's going to be hosted near with the nearest oceans of Johto, making Ash and Cassie quite interested as it, but also Jasmine is quite worried because she might not enter the tournament because right now she also needs to find the medicine across from Johto to give it to Ambrose, and not to mention to also pick up a friend that she hasn't been seen for years and really wants to meet her up again for some time. And this is where Ash gets an idea that he proposes if he could get just a one-on-one battle with her. Ash promises he will get back the medicine for Jasmine so that Jasmine can focus on getting a friend to Johto, and not to mention actually try to participate the tournament. And Jasmine isn't too quite sure, but clearly not seeing her friend for a long time is pretty much getting to her. And even though she can be annoyed, but but it seems like she's her only friend. And Jasmine isn't too sure she could trust the stranger, but she does trust Cassidy. And since Cassidy and Ash seems to know that Jasmine isn't too against it and a duel, and as they go to outside in the battlefield, as both friends next to one another, ready as Jasmine is wondering which Pokemon to send out, and chose one particular Pokemon that has never let her down and ultimately her most reliable Pokemon. As she sends out this Steelix in battle, as Ash seems to be quite interested to see the Steelix, as even though Ash has met a battle a few, but this particular seems to be quite very strong, and sending out Ash's own Steel type to battle Scizor, making Jasmine quite interested because not too long ago she was always trying to be a rock type specialist, but ever since her start has always changed the idea that maybe she's better as a steel type specialist. And once the referee begins the battle, as the two clash one another, as Scizor using bullet punch to mitigate up close managed to hit against Steelix, but unfortunately the Steelix's defense seems to be a bit too high and managed to smack away with a powerful iron tail, but Scizor managed to recover itself by spinning in the air using its small wings to allow him to guide himself underneath Steelix, where Steelix is unable to react, allowing for Scizor to strike fast with a powerful X-Scissor, which doesn't seem to do much, but it does seem to noticeably do damage, as Jasmine realizes that Scizor seems to be a very high level Pokemon, making Jasmine to be very worried, commanding for Steelix to use a powerful dig, as the Serpent Pokemon seems to do, as Scizor is trying to locate the Steel-type Pokemon until it attacks, but luckily as Scizor counters with a X-Scissors, as the two Pokemon blows begin to push them away, as Steelix seems to be very into the battle, including Scizor for a moment, as clearly these Steel-type Pokemon who doesn't seem to affect one, meaning it's going to be a brawl match, as the two Pokemon beginning to land powerful Steel-type moves one another, but clearly not seeing which one is taking the lead until Ash comments for Swords Dance, as Scizor begins to power up its attack, and once its Steel-type move Bullet Punch actually doing some damage to Steelix, making Jasmine to think ahead and tries to command for a powerful sandstorm, creating a huge sandstorm covering the battlefield. Even though it doesn't seem to affect Scizor, but it does, leaving to miss a few attacks because the sandstorm is covering its vision, allowing for Steelix to strike through with a powerful Iron Tail back to back, as unfortunately for Scizor beginning to really struggle, as Sozen does help him to do some damage when it does hit Steelix, but this battle begins to continue on as Ash and Jasmine realize this is really easily an equal battle until Jasmine has to pull out her secret weapon, and once Scizor begins trying to use a powerful X Scissor until Jasmine's command to grab onto Scizor, and Scizor has no choice but to take the damage as it begins to be bound by Steelix, and Jasmine commands for powerful Fire Fang, and Ash rises in shock, including Cassidy and Scizor, as Steelix begins its fangs to chomp on into Scizor, as unfortunately being bugged and Steel type seems to be very effective damage towards the bug, leaving Scizor to be unable to battle, leaving this one battle to be a close as Ash has to recall Scizor and pointing out that Johto seems to be noticeably stronger than Kanto and isn't too sure why, but Ash begins to doubt himself it was really and now this one Jasmine, as Ash isn't too sure if he should really begin to recall one of his older Pokemon, but simply throws that thought away completely, as Ash is already accepting their deal, as Ash and Cassidy promises to bring back Empress's medicine. As Ash and Cassidy pretty much made a plan with Jasmine, the gym leader, as they take a boat and travel all the way to a location where they could find her medicine. And after a few days of traveling and manage to get to the location, and after receiving the medicine, as they found out there's a gym leader around here, which is quite surprising to the both of them, as they would probably check on it. And besides, Jasmine will take a pretty long time to meet up with her friend, and after taking a little detour as they manage to meet with Chuck as he's in the process of almost closing down, and Cassidy and Ash pretty much begging the gym leader just to have two more battles, and Chuck not wanting to shut down a battle, simply agreeing the terms because they should be lucky because he's about to close down for his fighting tournament. And hearing this, as Ash and Cassie is beginning to look towards her and simply nodded and asking any information they could get around from Chuck, as Chuck simply shocked us and couldn't deny the two being very interested as they should be because he's hosting a fighting tournament around where the best trainers with their that specializes fighting type Pokemon will gather and begin to battle, and the winner could particularly battle a very strong trainer, pretty much a champion in the fighting tournament, and whoever could win throughout the ladder gets to challenge the fighting tournament champion, which he speculated that for a fact this particular trainer is definitely a certain elite, as Ash and Cassie the people are shocked to hear that revelation as they desperately really want to enter this tournament, as Chuck simply has now the opposing as they will try to register their name, but first they had to get past through him if he could even defeat him. If they couldn't defeat them, there's no way these two could climb up in the ladders. As Cassidy is the first one to challenge Chuck and giving Ash an opportunity what is type of trainer easy, and clearly he's a type of trainer that goes a full out battle and with his particular strong Pokemon, as Katichi does manage to struggle a bit, but luckily once she sends out her mighty Beedrill, as Shock pretty much begins to really struggle against the bug and poison type. Not to mention that Beedrill recently learned a new move that it's called Toxic Spice, which puts a hazard, making it very difficult for Shock to battle through, as this gives Cassidy a win and giving her Beedrill simply an unexpected win, and not just Beedrill, of course, with her other Pokemons with Azumarill, and of course Bailey. And once the next day has arrived, Ash is turned to battle with Chuck. Once the battle begins, as Chuck sends out his Primeape to battle, as Ash seeing a very familiar Pokemon that he has on him as well, as he's very familiar with the species and knowing that they are particularly very aggressive in battle. So that's he's going to use against Chuck as he sends out Zartu to battle, and Zartu can see the Primeape and already has a plan in motion as Ash commands for future sight as Zartu isn't against it and sending it out. In particular, nothing happens as Primer thinking that Zartu is taunting him, making it very angry, and quickly going out to it with a powerful cross chop, hoping to do some critical damage, but Zartu easily avoids their attack and launching a powerful air slash, forcing Primer to stagger a bit, but this time much more wary as Chuck simply calling upon his trusty move with a powerful ice punch as Zartu flying around didn't predict for Primeape to land a powerful ice punch square on its chest, allowing for Primeape to have an upper hand as it's beginning to climb up the ceiling where Primeape could easily catch up to Zartu who's in the mid-air as Zartu in a bit of a desperate situation as Ash managed to call for a psychic as Zartu can see what Ash is thinking and using a powerful psychic and using the ceiling where Primeape is climbing on, causing it to fall, forcing Primeape to let go as the future side finally begins to attack as it begins to attack Primeape unguarded, which is a brutal sin as Primeape simply falls upon it, squarely hit front of his face as Primeape is simply knocked out as Chuck is quite shocked to see that Zartu very much one-shot his Primeape, even though it is a psychic type he was hoping it wouldn't go down that fast, as Chuck just simply recalls back his Pokemon and sending out a particular Pokemon that making Ash very confused as Chuck sends out Sweezer. To Ash's surprise, he has seen Sneasel before, but this one looks particularly very differently as Chuck simply says that he caught this one particularly in Podera in his traveling site as Chuck just simply met this Pokemon and seeing that it has a fighting spirit which is enough for Chuck to capture it. And Ash really excited to battle a Pokemon that the Pokemon doesn't seem to know much about as Ash immediately goes on the offense and landing a powerful air slash, but to Ash's surprise as Sneasel seems to be a very fast Pokemon as Chuck commands for a home claw boosting its attack and accuracy and then commanding for a powerful X-Scissor which Zartu hasn't enough to avoid it and simply gets hit by the attack as Zartu is sent back in the battlefield but quickly finds out to avoid another X-Scissor as Ash commands for Zartu to command another future side. Unfortunately, as Zartu simply stops and simply coughs as Ash realizes that Zartu is somehow being poisoned. And Chuck simply says it's one of Sneasel's special ability, Poison Touch. Any contact move that has a chance on poisoning the opponent as Zartu is beginning to cough uncontrollably. And knowing that Zartu is his best Pokemon to handle Chuck's Pokemon, as he recalls Zartu, as realizing that this Sneasel seems to be part poison type, which might be a bit tricky, and wanting to send out Snowburn to battle. As Swinub is sent out in the battle, and the timid Pokemon isn't as afraid as the battle with Whitney, as Swinub seems to be a bit more confident than Ashton expected, which gives him enough encouragement to battle Sneasel, as Sneasel again is using Horn Claw and charging for a powerful X-Scissor, but to Chuck's surprise, as Swinub uses Dig to avoid the attack, and Ash not wanting to attack just yet, but using a miss as Snow White jumps up and uses Haze, which simply cancels all the boosts that Sneasel has been building up to, leaving it to do not as too powerful. A Swinub does launch a powerful Icy Wave, which does a lot of damage, doing a lot of damage than expected as enough for Swinub to do a powerful dig, as Sneasel does try to dodge out of the way, but unfortunately, not knowing where the opponent gives it a disadvantage, as Snywhite simply attacks him on the ground with a powerful dig, which is enough for it to knock out Sneasel. To utter its surprise as the snow Swinub begins to celebrate, feeling very confident, and Ash pretty proud at his Pokemon. As Chuck could simply see that Swinub, being a very timid Pokemon, has conquered its fear and making Chuck even more excited as he sends out Poliwhirl to battle, and immediately the difference is very apparent as Poliwhirl not holding back, using a powerful dynamic punch as Swinub does manage to avoid it and tries to attack back with a powerful Ice Wind, but as Poliwhirl being very resistant to the ice typing, but beginning to launch a powerful liquidation, which is enough to unfortunately knock out the Swinub Pokemon, forcing Ash to recall it. But Ash is very happy to Swinub that it did much more better than expected, as Ash simply recalls it, and sending out a Pokemon that particularly won to battle, and sending out Poliwhirl to battle, as Poliwhirl simply readies as it duels a fighting pose against the Pokemon. As the battle begins, as Poliwhirl, not wanting to waste time, tries to launch a powerful Ice Punch, but Poliwhirl managed to move out of the way as it launches a powerful Water Pulse, which unfortunately doesn't do much against Poliwhirl, as Poliwhirl begins a barrage of bubble beams, which does tremendous damage now to the point where Poliwhirl is exhausted, as Shock simply calls for a bulk up, as Poliwhirl begins to pose, increasing its defense and special attack. As once Poliwhirl begins to try to a powerful bubble beam, but unfortunately the attack simply is too weak this time around, as Poliwhirl has enough power to knock out Poliwhirl with a powerful dynamic punch, which sends it across the arena. As Ash has to recall Poliwhirl back to his Pokeball, as Ash has one more Pokemon left, as he was hoping for Poliwhirl to do something, but unfortunately Poliwhirl seems to be very much so chucks his aces Pokemon, and sending out Johto, and still pretty much coughing from the poison. And once the battle begins, as the two continues, as Poliwhirl desperately tries to hit it with a powerful Ice Punch, but Johto not falling for the same trick twice, as he managed to move around and landing a powerful air slash, as this time around is doing significant damage. Hotchuck simply uses the bulk up as it's beginning to bulk up, as Ash this time commanding for a future sight, which does so, but unfortunately does take poison, as this gives enough Poliwhirl to finish up the attack and going back with a powerful liquidation, which unfortunately Azatu being poisoned has been caught by the attack, but to Ash's surprise Azatu is still standing, leaving Chuck to be quite surprised until it hits him, as Azatu is closer enough to Poliwhirl to launch a powerful Giga Drain, which the water type seems to take a lot of damage from it, and not just that, as Azatu simply grabs onto Poliwhirl and begins to lift him up, as Poliwhirl tries to let go from Azatu and beginning to land a powerful dynamic punch, but luckily Azatu being both psychic and flying type begins to resist and beginning to send Poliwhirl into the air, as the future side begins to attack, as this knocks out Poliwhirl, as Ash is the winner here and earning his fourth badge here.